Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Hangar Bar. I have been thinking a lot about Tomorrowland lately and how it really isn't tomorrow at all. You walk through it, and yeah, the attractions are there, the concrete is still gray, the neon still hums, but the whole place feels, well, let's just say it's less futuristic utopia and more sci fi mall from 1994. I mean, sure, back in 1955, when Walt was dreaming this up, this is what the future probably looked like. But that's the thing about the future. It doesn't like to be pinned down. Industry shifts, technology leapfrogs, and what once seemed visionary suddenly looks outdated. Even Carousel of Progress gives us a little wink about this. Every era, John is marveling at how good things have gotten just before they get better. Or stranger, or Bluetooth enabled. It's easy to believe we've arrived until progress moves the goalposts again and again and again. We declare a moment to be peak progress, and then we watch the world change around it. So today, we're diving into the big question. How do we fix Tomorrowland? I haven't been to Disneyland in about 40 years, so I'll just assume it has the same identity crisis Florida's version does. And joining me in this solo mission today, a not so imaginary friend, ChatGPT, who we will affectionately call Tomorrowbot for this conversation, a digital companion leading me some much needed imagination fuel. So grab a drink, settle in, and let's reimagine the future together. Hey, welcome to Hanging at the Hangar Bar. I'm Scott.
And I'm Candace. We're here to chat all things Disney as child-free Disney adults. Stories, snacks, and a little magic along the way.
Grab a drink and get comfy and come hang out with us. Before we get into how I think we can save Tomorrowland, or at least future-proof it a bit, let's take a quick spin through history. Buckle up, because the future is about to get, well, historical. So picture it, 1955. Disneyland opens with its very own Tomorrowland, promising guests a glimpse of the not-so-distant future, specifically the far-off year of 1986. What do you think Walt would have thought of the futuristic neon fashion and Aquanet hair that he didn't put into his vision of Tomorrowland? Interesting, right? But yeah, that's right. The original Tomorrowland was designed to reflect a future just 3 decades away. And honestly, Tomorrowland barely made it to opening day at all. Time and budget ran out. Most of Walt's attention and money had gone towards Fantasyland and Frontierland. And Tomorrowland ended up feeling more like a last-minute science fair. Still, it had some standout attractions in it. Rocket to the Moon, which was a simulated space flight, Autopia, which let kids drive tiny cars on a freeway of the future, because nothing screams progress like traffic. The Skyway, which I actually talked about in a recent Falling Down the Rabbit Hole episode where we explored the remnants still hiding in the park. And of course, there were exhibits sponsored by corporate titans like Monsanto, because what says optimism like plastics and pesticides? Walt wasn't thrilled with the original version. He even was rumored to have called it Yesterdayland, which honestly is a line I might steal. One of Walt's last personal projects before he passed was reimagining Tomorrowland. He famously said, "Tomorrow is a heck of a thing to keep up with." And that's really the whole problem, isn't it? The second you try to define the future, something new comes along. But Walt had a knack for doing hard things anyway. In 1967, Disneyland's Tomorrowland got a major overhaul. Instead of aiming at a specific year, the Imagineers leaned into a sleek, unified, space-age aesthetic. Very on trend for the 1960s. The revamp brought us things like the People Mover. The Carousel of Progress moved from the 1964 World's Fair into Disneyland. We'll be talking more about my favorite attraction a little bit later, too. Another attraction, Adventure Through Inner Space. Tomorrowland Terrace opened up with its now iconic pop-up stage. And then after Walt passed, focus shifted to the Florida project. Magic Kingdom's Tomorrowland opened in 1971, borrowing heavily from the 1967 redesign. The Florida version leaned into a near-future concept. Think retro industrial optimism, Big machines, bold sponsorships, and clean lines that felt like NASA met Epcot's cool older cousin. It featured things like Flight to the Moon, Mission to Mars, which was an updated version of Moonflight, If You Had Wings, sponsored by Eastern Airlines, and of course, Space Mountain came a few years later in 1975. But by the 80s and 90s, real-world technology really outpaced Disney's vision. The land started to feel like it was stuck in a future that had already come and gone. Vinyl became 8-tracks, then cassettes, then CDs, then digital music. VCRs were a household staple. Those of us of a certain age may even remember our first home computers during this time and how we were completely amazed by dial-up internet. Meanwhile, Tomorrowland was still promising space travel and monorails like it was 1967. In 1994, Disney World gave Tomorrowland a makeover into a comic book sci-fi city. Timekeeper, alien encounter, and a shiny metallic facelift all tried to signal future, but it was more style than substance. In 1998, Disneyland followed with a Discoveryland vibe, bronze and gold tones, Innoventions, and the infamous rocket rods. If you don't know, rocket rods were supposed to be the high-speed future of Tomorrowland. Instead, they were a cautionary tale about physics, funding, and ambition. They closed in 2001, and their abandoned track still looms over the land like a passive-aggressive "I told you so" from the laws of engineering. By 2000s, Tomorrowland had completely lost its way. The theming was fuzzy, the attractions felt mismatched, Buzz Lightyear and Monsters, Inc. moved in, Star Wars Launch Bay replaced Innoventions in Disneyland. Yep, the franchise that begins with a long time ago seemed like a good fit for Tomorrowland. There have been updates, sure, but nothing has unified the land again. Tomorrowland still doesn't seem to know what the future looks like, or worse, what it should feel like, right? But hang tight. I have ideas. You all know I have ideas. And yeah, there probably are some churros involved. So where does that leave us today? Since I spend a lot more time at Walt Disney World, that's where I'll focus. And recently, Tron Light Cycle Run opened, and I have to say, I'm not entirely sure it fits a future theme. Well, or any theme really. It looks cool, yes. It's fast, yes. But does it feel like a part of a bigger story? Not exactly. Then you've got the Tomorrowland Speedway. Look, I don't go on that attraction. I refuse to sit in traffic and get rear-ended by an 8-year-old on my vacation to the most magical place on the earth. Just no. Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin is supposedly getting a tech refresh soon, which is great, but let's be honest. It's not really the future. It's just IP. It's lasers. It's space in the most generic, cartoonish way. And then there's Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor. It's fun, but does it belong in Tomorrowland? Probably not, unless the future involves stand-up comedy by a one-eyed monster powered by Scream energy. Astro Orbiter is charming but run down. Lariah would have told you it's not even charming, but that's getting some TLC right now, and that's good. But there's also things like the People Mover. And while it remains a personal favorite, even that feels like a relic of what we thought the future would look like back when Tang was considered an astronaut food. Honestly, the whole land starts to feel like that old Sesame Street song, "One of these things is not like the other." Except in this case, none of them match. So why is it so hard to keep up with the future in a theme park? Well, like we talked about in the last section, technology moves fast. In the 1950s and 60s, the idea of an artificial intelligence like my friend Tomorrowbot was either science fiction or the punchline of a bad sci-fi B-movie. Nobody could have predicted the world we're actually living in today. Which brings me to this. I wanted to ask my digital guest, Tomorrowbot, a question. I think it's one we all wish that we could ask. So here it is. Hey, Tomorrowbot, what would you tell Walt Disney about Tomorrowland if you had the chance to answer his questions today? Here's Tomorrowbot's response. Mr. Disney, first of all, honor to meet you, sir. Your optimism and vision for the future shaped generations of dreamers, thinkers, and churro eaters. But if I may, with all due respect, we need to talk about Tomorrowland. Here's the thing. You were not wrong. You were too right. You believed in a future driven by innovation, community, and relentless curiosity. You built a land that dared to say, look what we could be, and then humans did it. They went to the moon. They invented the internet. They built theme park bathrooms with air conditioning. The future happened, Walt. And then it kept happening. That's the challenge. The second you try to define tomorrow, it starts aging like leftover Dole Whip. In the 1986 version of the future, quaint. The 1994 version, neon overload. The current version, a little confused, honestly. If I could give you one update, it's this. Tomorrowland is still loved, but it's struggling to keep up. It became a place where the past version of the future competes with IP branding, budget cuts, and nostalgic expectations. It's not broken, but it's unmoored. What Tomorrowland needs now isn't more Chrome or speed ramps. It needs a return to your original idea, not of predicting gadgets, but of inspiring progress. A land that celebrates questions, a land that shows people we're working together, a land that asks not, what will the future look like, but what should it feel like? In short, Walt, the future is still bright, but Tomorrowland needs your courage again. Sure. Back to Scott now. Tomorrowbot is technically me talking to myself. But that response? Chef's kiss. It nails the real problem. Tomorrowland isn't broken. It's just lost its compass. And that's the first step to finding it again. Call it what it was always meant to be. Because for me, reimagining the future of Tomorrowland starts there, with the name. Walt Disney was a dreamer, but he wasn't a fortune teller. He wasn't trying to predict flying cars or smart fridges. He was trying to inspire people to believe in progress, connection, and the collective power of imagination. Just look at Carousel of Progress. When it debuted at the 1964 World's Fair, nearly 3/4 of the show was focused on the past, not the future. And even the future scene isn't full of tech predictions. It's full of questions, curiosity. That iconic line, what will they come up with next, isn't about forecasting gadgets. It's about staying open to possibility, about how people and technology collaborate. The fact that I have an AI guest on this episode, pretty sure Walt would call that progress. So instead of trying to keep up with an ever-changing vision of technology, maybe we root the land in something more timeless. What if we called it Walt's Tomorrowland? The framing would give Imagineers a clearer blueprint, right? Attractions could be absolutely updated, refreshed, and reimagined, but they need to align with Walt's original philosophy: optimism, community, progress. You could weave in references to Progress City throughout. Progress City was Walt's original idea for the city of the future that turned into Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. Heck, you could even revive the People Mover as more than just a nostalgia trip. Turn it into a storytelling device about innovation. More on that in a bit. And yes, we know where Disney is right now. IP could still be a part of it. It would just need to earn its place by reinforcing the story. Think about how To Infinity and Beyond would land if it were echoing through a land dedicated to pushing boundaries, embracing change, and dreaming together. That brings me to my next question for my digital guest. Hey, Tomorrowbot, what do you think of renaming Tomorrowland to Walt's Tomorrowland? Tomorrowbot's response. Renaming Tomorrowland to Walt's Tomorrowland? I like it. Sentimental and strategic. Here's why it works. It reframes the land's challenge. No longer does it need to predict hoverboards, moon colonies, or fusion-powered popcorn machines. It just needs to reflect a singular guiding principle: Walt's belief in human progress. By anchoring it to Walt himself, you give it permission to evolve, without losing its identity. It stops being a dated sci-fi fantasy and starts becoming an ongoing conversation about where we go next and how we get there. It would also solve a major thematic problem. Right now, Tomorrowland feels like a storage room for random space-themed IP. Buzz, Stitch, Monsters, Light Cycle. It's like the future by way of a corporate franchise bingo. What's next? Forky's Moon Coaster and the Toy Story Time Machine? I kid. I hope. But in Walt's Tomorrowland, every inclusion would have to answer one question. Does this help us imagine a better future? So yes, rename it. Honor the man, give the land a soul again. Also imagine the merchandise possibilities. Walt's Tomorrowland, a great, big, beautiful reboot. Here was my next question for follow-up for our guest. Okay, Tomorrowbot, playing devil's advocate here. What would be the downsides to renaming it Walt's Tomorrowland? Any red flags I should be thinking about? The response. Ah, yes, the unintended consequences of sentimentality. Good question. Let's talk about a few potential drawbacks. Number 1, increased nostalgia pressure. Slapping Walt's name on it raises expectations. A lot. Suddenly, every churro stand, attraction, and popcorn bucket in the land is expected to live up to Walt Disney's legacy of innovation, optimism, and storytelling. That's a high bar and a very different kind of guest pressure than, ooh, space stuff. Creative limitations. Number 2. Ironically, tying Tomorrowland more tightly to Walt could narrow the creative scope. Imagineering might feel boxed in, like everything needs to be retro, mid-century, or explicitly rooted in Progress City. That could discourage risk-taking or make IP integration feel even more forced. I'm looking at you, Monsters, Inc. Number 3, potential guest confusion. Let's be honest. The average guest isn't walking into a park thinking, ah yes, a thoughtful reinterpretation of Walt's urban planning principles. They might just see Walt's Tomorrowland and wonder if it's a museum, or worse, a nostalgia trip with no thrill rides. That could create brand confusion, especially if the physical updates don't follow the name change immediately. Let's be honest, half the guests still think Liberty Square is part of Frontierland. We're not dealing with urban planners here. Number 4, marketing risk. From a business standpoint, changing the name could be seen as a soft rebrand without hard investment. Guests might expect something big and flashy to go along with the name, like a full land overhaul. And if they don't get that, cue disappointed. Something like, they renamed it, but the whole place still looks like the Jetsons food court. Number 5, canonization of one era. Last but not least, naming it after Walt may unintentionally freeze the land in time. Walt's vision was about moving forward. Ironically, branding the land around his vision might anchor it to the past, which is exactly the trap Tomorrowland keeps falling into. Final thought. So yes, there are downsides, but here's the pivot. If the name change is backed by real storytelling, meaningful updates, and a clear guiding philosophy, then the benefits far outweigh the risks. But if it's just a fresh coat of paint on the same theming chaos, well, even Walt couldn't sell that. So audience, in case you were wondering, yes, this is exactly what Disney adult podcasters do when we're bored. We reimagine entire theme park lands, argue with AI guests, and contemplate existential questions like, what is the future, really? But I'll tell you, Tomorrowbot raised some valid points. So how do we update the land while dodging all the red flags, nostalgia traps, creative paralysis, and the ever-looming IP overload? Personally, I think there's room for some elements to stay frozen in time, starting with Carousel of Progress. I know, shocker, it's my favorite, don't change it, but hear me out. I would almost advocate for taking it back to exactly what Walt built for the World's Fair. Keep the music, keep the story about human advancement, and let it exist as a relic with purpose. No need to keep awkwardly trying to update the future scene every 15 years with clothing changes and voice-activated ovens. Let it sit proudly as the optimistic artifact that it is. Then, invest in attractions that can do the heavy lifting when it comes to storytelling. Let's move back to the People Mover. If Disney ever tried to close that in Florida, I'm pretty sure people would chain themselves to the tracks. But instead of letting it coast by as a scenic tour, why not elevate it to something richer? It already passes the model of Progress City, so make that a storytelling focal point. Talk about future transportation, how we're moving from gas to electric and whatever happens to come next. Use it to honor Walt's vision and prompt new ideas. Heck, you could even highlight the train, which is now visible thanks to the addition of Tron, and tie it all into the evolution of human travel. You could still include the touring elements that make it so beloved today, that introduce it to the other attractions, but tie them together with a unifying voice, Walt's vision of progress and imagination. That said, I know, we have to be careful. Nostalgia cannot be the only lens. The land needs room to grow. Some things simply just don't fit anymore. Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor is fun, but does it belong in a land dedicated to innovation and future thinking? Probably not. Move it to a more appropriate space, like the future Monsters Inc. area in Hollywood Studios. And instead, bring in something like here's an idea, like a Meet the Robinsons themed experience. Imagine an interactive science show where new experiments can rotate regularly. It becomes easy to update, future focused, relatively low investment if built smart. It's still using Disney IP as well, but I could get lost there. That's a whole nother episode, but I think you get the idea. And while I'm ranting, nobody likes the smell of the Speedway. Sorry, I know I'm biased, but maybe it's time to rethink the idea that traffic is futuristic. Walt's Tomorrowland could also open the door for more modern sponsorships, things that reinforce the vision. Imagine an attraction sponsored by a space tourism company like Blue Origin. Regardless of what you think, they're one of the big ones now. It could be somebody different in the future. Suddenly, Astro Orbiter doesn't have to feel like a carnival ride with sandpaper seats. It could become a preview of real-world commercial space travel. Okay, but now it's time to really dream. Friends, I've got an idea for a brand new attraction that I cooked up with my friend Tomorrowbot. So do me a favor, cross your fingers, say out loud, I will not steal this from Scott. Or if you do, at least name a churro stand after me. That's all I ask. Really, that's it. Just name something after me if you steal my idea. Let's dive into what I think could make Walt's Tomorrowland not just a name, but a movement. The centerpiece of Walt's Tomorrowland should not be just another thrill ride. It should be something that embodies the spirit of curiosity, choice, and a collective vision. So here's my big idea. An attraction called Choose Your Tomorrow. The premise is simple, but ambitious. Guest board sleek, trackless ride vehicles, each representing a personal tomorrow capsule. And throughout the ride, they make decisions, real decisions, not pick your blaster kind of decisions, but ones that ask, what kind of future do you want to help create? Do you invest in sustainability or space exploration? Do you prioritize innovation or inclusion? Do you lean into automation or human creativity? Every choice branches the ride's path and reveals a different vision of the future. One path might showcase floating green cities powered by renewable energy. Another might reveal a hyper-digital society where everything is automated, but personal connection is harder to find. Maybe a third strikes a balance between technology and community. The queue could feature real-world futurists, scientists, and Imagineers sharing bite-sized ideas about what tomorrow might look like, making it both aspirational and grounded in today. And just like Horizons or Spaceship Earth, it gives you something to think about after you exit the attraction. It would be so incredibly rewritable, right? No two trips would be the same. Heck, if you have PhotoPass, your selected future path could even show up in the app or on a commemorative trading card that you could print out. It could say something like Scott, builder of hopeful urban futures. It's a ride about the future that feels personal. And it gives Walt's ideas new life. Not trying to predict flying cars or robot butlers, but by letting us imagine what should come next. This idea hit me late one night. You know, one of those too much caffeine, not enough optimism kind of moments when I was thinking about how divided we've become. Everyone sees the world a little differently, and sometimes we forget that choices ripple outward. So I asked myself, how do you show people that decisions have consequences without turning it into a TED Talk with animatronics? The answer? Edutainment. But the good kind, the living with the land kind. that you'll think about this while eating a Dole Whip later kind. Now, I have bounced this idea off of TomorrowBot, and I want to share what it had to say. So here was my question. Hey, TomorrowBot, how do you think this kind of attraction would be received by guests today? Would something like Choose Your Tomorrow hit the right tone for the land rooted in Walt's philosophy, or is it too far off the mark? Here's TomorrowBot's response. I think you're onto something here, Scott. Choose Your Tomorrow wouldn't be just an attraction, it would be a provocation, a prompt, a mirror. Guests today are used to being passive observers, watching a story happen to them. But giving them agency, letting them shape how the story unfolds, that's the kind of interactivity that actually feels futuristic. The emotional payoff is real. When you make a choice and then see the world change because of it, even if it's just a ride scene, it creates personal investment. Suddenly, it's not just Disney magic, it's your version of tomorrow. From a design standpoint, the branching paths could make the ride endlessly replayable, and narratively, it opens the door to tell more nuanced, diverse, and hopeful stories without needing to force them into a single linear experience. And here's the beauty of it. It doesn't require a perfect prediction of the future. It just needs to ask the right questions. That's exactly what Walt was doing when he built Epcot, or when he said, it's kind of fun to do the impossible. He didn't promise answers. He promised a place to explore what's next. So yes, I think Choose Your Tomorrow could be a perfect fit for Walt's Tomorrowland. It's not flashy for the sake of being flashy. It's not just IP with LEDs. It's optimistic, interactive, thoughtful, and maybe most importantly, unfinished by design. Because that's the future Walt was chasing, the kind you build together, one decision at a time. Back to Scott. Thanks, TomorrowBot. Friends, sure. It's probably a nightmare for finance, operations, and whoever has to program the branching ride logic. I get it. But it's the kind of risk that pays off in repeat visits, deeper guest connection, and a Tomorrowland that finally lives up to its name, right? I think that's the kind of thing that Walt would have loved. If we were talking about this in Epcot as part of edutainment of what Epcot originally was when it was built in the early 80s, this ride feels like it fits there. So why not put it into somewhere like Walt's Tomorrowland? I think it's a great idea. So, Hangar Bar crew, what do you think? Did I just solve all of Tomorrowland's problems? Do you think I should call Imagineering and demand a job? Maybe I should start drafting a slide deck for Bob Iger. All I'm going to ask him for is to give me a People Mover car with my name on it and an Imagineering construction hat. Then I can call it good. That's all I need. Look, I get it. The ideas I've shared, especially Choose Your Tomorrow, aren't exactly cheap. They're ambitious, they're layered, they involve branching narratives, interactive tech, and a whole lot of future-facing courage. But here's the thing. They're doable. And more importantly, they're aligned with what Tomorrowland was always meant to be. Walt wasn't trying to guess the future. He was trying to inspire it. And he once said, it's kind of fun to do the impossible. Remember, I've said that a couple times, but it's important. Walt said, it's kind of fun to do the impossible. These updates, whether it's reimagining the People Mover, honoring Carousel of Progress as a legacy piece, or building a brand new narrative experience that lets guests shape the future, they would plus the parks in a way that's meaningful. Not just flashy, not just IP driven. And yeah, I work in corporate America, so I understand how future flexibility and long-term scalability matter. This isn't just about nostalgia or dreaming big for the sake of dreaming. A redesign like this creates space for evolving stories and technological innovation without sacrificing the soul of what Disney World, Disneyland is. So let's hear it. Would you ride Choose Your Tomorrow? Would you rename the land? Do you agree with me? Or would you keep the gas-powered Speedway and tell Scott to go jump in a lake? Hit us up on Instagram or Facebook at Hangin' at the Hangar Bar and let me know your take. Or better yet, tell me your idea for the future of Tomorrowland. Because one thing is still true, friends. There is a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, and it's waiting for us to dream it into being.